I have always considered nighttime travel a peaceful way to avoid traffic and enjoy the road in solitude. That weekend, after a pleasant visit to my parents in the countryside, I decided to head home at night. I felt confident and calm as I started the engine of my old but reliable car, which had accompanied me on numerous adventures. It was just after 11 p.m., and the city was asleep as I set off. The route suggested by the GPS was new to me. Cedar Road was the name, a path not very popular, but supposedly faster according to my app. The city lights faded behind me, and the urban landscape gave way to open fields and a starry sky. The road was enveloped in darkness, illuminated only by my car's headlights, and each kilometer increased the sense of isolation. On the passenger seat, a small suitcase with my things, and on the radio, a station playing rock classics, my attempt to keep the environment relaxed. As the night progressed, the silence of Cedar Road became increasingly noticeable, broken only by the sound of the engine and the music, which now seemed more like distant company. There was something disturbingly peaceful in that darkness, and with each mile, I felt the discomfort growing within me. The poorly lit road wound through gentle hills, and the moon, although bright, cast long shadows that distorted the landscape, turning each tree and bush into ghostly figures. 2 hours after my departure, the first signs of trouble began. The car's temperature gauge suddenly rose, and a burnt smell filled the cabin. With a heavy sigh, I pulled over onto the shoulder, the only part of the road where a strip of grass separated the asphalt from an open field. I turned off the engine, hoping it was just a temporary overheating, and stepped out to inspect the engine under the faint light of my cell phone. While leaning over the hood, I heard the sound of an engine approaching. Initially, I thought it was a blessing. Perhaps someone could offer help. However, my hope quickly turned to apprehension when a black, old car abruptly stopped behind mine. A man of medium stature, with disheveled hair and a heavy coat, got out of the car. He approached with a smile that was meant to be friendly, but his eyes did not match the expression. "Trouble with the car, miss? Can I help?" he asked, his voice somewhat anxious. I thanked him and explained that I just needed to wait for the engine to cool down. But he insisted, stepping closer. "It's not safe for a woman alone on a road like this. Let me take a look." I instinctively stepped back. Something in the way he approached, too confidently, made my heart race. "No, thank you. I'm already leaving." He didn't move. Instead, he took another step towards me. "I insist." At that moment, I realized that any help he might offer was likely not well-intentioned. With a leap, I ran back to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got inside. He followed, banging on the glass with a smile that now showed something more sinister. With my heart pounding erratically, I started the car, praying it would respond. With a jolt and a mechanical groan, the engine came back to life, and I stepped on the accelerator, not looking back. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the man running back to his vehicle. My car was not in its best shape, and the dark, winding road only complicated my escape. His car lights soon appeared in my mirrors. He was following me, accelerating, reducing the distance between us with a frightening determination. Each turn I made, he replicated, his headlights like predatory eyes in the darkness behind me. Fear took over, and all I could think about was escaping that terrible situation. The trees passed in a blur beside the road, each shadow seeming a spectator of my distress. In a desperate attempt, I turned onto a small side road, hoping to lose him. The road was even narrower and poorly maintained, full of potholes and stones that made my car shake violently. I looked again in the rearview mirror, hoping not to see his headlights anymore, but there they were, persistent and ever closer. In a moment of pure panic, his car sped up, dangerously close to mine. Feeling that every second could be my last, I pressed the accelerator to the max, despite the fear of losing control of the car on that unfit road. The noise of the engine was deafening, mixed with the sound of my own heavy breathing. Suddenly, his lights disappeared. For a moment, I thought he had given up, but the reality was different. My pursuer had crashed. As I passed the curve, I saw his car smashed against a tree. Without slowing down, I continued, leaving that scene behind until I reached a more populated area, where I finally stopped at a brightly lit gas station. Trembling and still in shock, I called the police. While I waited, the fear that he might have followed me remained, but the police arrived quickly. I explained everything that had happened, and they promptly began to investigate. After the incident, while the police were investigating, I sat at the gas station, drinking a weak but comforting coffee the attendant offered me. My entire body shook thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't escaped. The police returned a few hours later, informing me that the man had been taken to the hospital with serious injuries but was alive. Now, whenever I tell this story, it's not just to warn about the dangers of solitary night travel, but also to remind myself about the fragility of our perception of security. Some decisions, as innocent as they may seem, can lead us down dangerously unpredictable paths. That night, the decision to head home after a relaxing meetup with friends in a coastal town seemed straightforward. I decided to follow the route suggested by the GPS, despite the weather being far from ideal. The recommendation was a long suspension bridge, which always gave me a bit of unease, but the alternative was a much longer route through the mountains. The sky was already showing signs of an imminent storm, with heavy clouds and winds beginning to howl ominously. As I drove onto the bridge, the first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and quick, hitting the windshield forcefully. Visibility quickly deteriorated, and the headlights barely cut through the curtain of water forming in front of me. The wind shook the car from side to side, testing the grip of the tires on the wet road. Even with the radio on, trying to bring some comfort with soft music, the sound of thunder echoing over the tumultuous sea waters was deafening. Being alone on that bridge, with the storm growing by the minute, was enough to make my heart beat faster. But I had no idea what I was about to face on that crossing. As I progressed along the bridge, my thoughts oscillated between the safety of getting home and the growing fear that something might go wrong. It was then that, amidst the torrential rain, I spotted a silhouette in the distance. It looked like a person, standing on the shoulder, hooded, motionless under the storm. My first instinct was concern. Who would be insane enough to be out there on a night like this? I slowed down, approaching carefully. The wind and rain made almost supernatural noises, while lightning illuminated the sky and the figure in front of me. As I got closer, I could see that the person was standing, facing away from the sea, staring in the direction of the virtually non-existent traffic at that hour. Rationality told me to keep moving, not to stop, but curiosity and a hint of concern made me slow down even more. That's when the figure turned around. I couldn't see the face, hidden under the hood, but something in that person's posture sent a chill through me that wasn't caused by the cold. Suddenly, without any warning, the figure began to walk towards me. It wasn't a normal walk. There was a strange urgency, almost a run. The fear that was initially just a seed now grew, fueled by adrenaline. My heart raced, and all the stories of robberies and incidents in isolated places I had heard came to mind. With trembling hands on the steering wheel, I shifted into gear and pressed the accelerator. But at the same time, a part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing. What if that person really needed help? What if they were in danger? But then, why would they move towards me in such a threatening manner? The figure was now running, clearly chasing my car. I looked through the rearview mirror and saw it getting farther away, but the dread that had settled in did not allow me to relax. The intense rain and wind seemed accomplices in that chase, making the escape even more dramatic and dangerous. After a few minutes, the rain let up, and I decided to stop the car to try to calm my nerves. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. In the silence that followed, my cell phone vibrated with an alert that froze my blood. An emergency message informed about a dangerous fugitive seen in the area of the bridge. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest as I read the message again. The alert detailed that the individual was considered extremely dangerous and potentially armed. Looking up, I saw, through the rearview mirror, a hooded figure approaching quickly. It made no sense, as I was almost certain I had driven a good distance with the car. Without a second thought, I started the car and accelerated until I could no longer feel any strange presence, only managing to slow down as more cars appeared on the road. One night, while most people would be snuggling into their beds, I was just beginning my journey. I am a doctor at a large hospital in New York City. After a grueling shift that spanned the darkness of the night, the last thing most people would want is a long car ride. But for me, it was the perfect opportunity to surprise my family with an unexpected visit to our hometown, a small town in the Adirondack Mountains, not too far from the hustle and bustle of the big city. The decision was impulsive. I knew the road would be nearly deserted at that hour, and something about the silence and solitude of the early morning always calmed me. As I left the hospital parking lot, I felt a mix of exhaustion and excitement. The sky was particularly starry, but a subtle mist began to form as I moved away from urban lighting and delved into the less traveled rural roads. The first hours of the journey were tranquil and almost meditative. The only sound was the constant hum of the engine and the occasional rustling of the trees when a stronger breeze met them. However, as I ventured deeper into rural roads, a dense fog began to form, increasingly reducing visibility. With each winding turn, I slowed down, my heart beating a bit faster, not out of fear, but out of respect for the natural forces beginning to make their presence felt. That's when I noticed it. Initially, it was just a distant dot in my rearview mirrors. A car, apparently ordinary, which I assumed was another night traveler. However, as it approached, something in my instinct screamed that something was wrong. Its behavior on the road began to change. Its presence became more threatening, with aggressive maneuvers and headlights that flashed intermittently, as if trying to communicate something that I couldn't understand. As the car got closer and closer, my thoughts raced trying to find a logical explanation for this relentless pursuit. Perhaps it's someone in need of medical help, I initially thought, trying to justify the aggressive approach. However, this theory fell apart when, after I changed lanes to let it pass, the vehicle insisted on staying glued behind me, its headlights repeatedly invading the interior of my car through the rearview mirror. With each kilometer that passed, fear began to take hold of me. My mind, trained to remain calm in medical emergencies, now struggled to maintain control in a completely different situation. The narrow, winding road, surrounded by dense trees and shrouded in fog, seemed like the perfect setting for a nightmare. I tried to increase my speed, hoping that perhaps the driver would give up or at least reduce the proximity. However, he matched each of my accelerations with an even faster one, maintaining a dangerously short distance between our vehicles. Desperate, I grabbed my cell phone trying to call the police, but the signal was weak and intermittent, a reflection of my remote location. Each failed connection attempt only increased my sense of isolation and helplessness. The curves in the road became more pronounced, and the fog thicker, as if nature conspired against me that night. In a moment of clarity, I realized that I would have to take drastic action. I decided to make a risky maneuver. I would feign an exit on a secondary road and, at the last moment, return to the main road, hoping to confuse my pursuer. With my heart pounding to the rhythm of the panic taking over my chest, I made the feint. For a brief moment, I thought I had succeeded, seeing the car hesitate in the rearview mirror. But like a predator that does not give up on its prey, it quickly corrected its course and continued the pursuit, now with even greater intensity. The silence of the night was broken only by the roar of the engines and the sound of my own sobs of fear as I tried to maintain control of the car and the situation. Hope began to fade when, suddenly, a light appeared ahead. It was a police patrol positioned at a routine checkpoint. I never thought I would be so relieved to see police lights. I accelerated toward them, waving frantically to attract attention. When I finally stopped the car, trembling and crying, I quickly recounted what was happening. The officers acted immediately, signaling for the car that was following me to also stop. As the officers approached it cautiously, I just watched, enveloped in the safety of the police lights, still trying to fully understand the gravity of what I had escaped. The minutes that followed seemed to stretch infinitely while the officers questioned the driver. With each gesture of theirs, each look in my direction, my heart skipped a beat, fearing what might come next. Finally, one of the officers came to me, his face serious, hiding the emotions until he began to speak. "You are safe now," he said calmly. "The man who was following you is known in the area for aggressive and dangerous behavior. He recently escaped from detention and has been wanted for several offenses, including assaults on lone drivers on this same road." The reality of what he said took time to settle in. I had been pursued, not by a malevolent spirit from campfire tales, but by a very real and human danger. The officers assured me that he would be taken back into custody and would face new charges for what he did. They advised me to give a statement and, after ensuring that I was physically okay, suggested that I go to the station for the necessary procedures. With the pursuer now under police control, I drove to the station, the adrenaline slowly leaving my body, replaced by deep fatigue and occasional tremors. At the station, as I recounted the events of the night, I began to truly process the terror of that pursuit. Each detail narrated seemed to bring a new wave of relief and shock, internally thanking myself for escaping unharmed.